Hi, Roy here, and welcome again to another edition of the Right Has Left podcast, where we talk all things Trumpism. And this week, of course, is just a lot of breaking news going on, so let's go ahead and get right into it. And our first breaking story, of course, is going to be our top story, and that is dealing with the terrible situation with the hardworking folks with the TSA, and as you're well aware of, they haven't been paid, the folks that work there at our nation's airports, for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the situation has just been getting worse and worse, with the Senate just the other day passed a bill to get them funded, which excluded funding ICE, what's the Democrats wanted in the first place. That particular version that the Senate did, just so you know, included the fact that the the ICE agents would still be able to cover up their faces with their masks. They still would not have to be able to identify themselves with a name tag, and they would not have to wear body cameras. Now, as you're well aware of, the ICE agents that have been stationed at our airports do not have their faces covered. They're kind of there to work with controlling the crowds, making sure that the lines are taken care of. Of course, they still have been arresting illegal immigrants at the airports, but they have been more of a low-key factor. Now, what has been going on, the Senate unanimously voted their version of the package. President Trump has said that he's going to sign an executive order to get the TSA agents funded, but the House rejected, as I record this late Friday night. Now, things may change Saturday, and of course, I don't do these broadcasts live, but as I record this on a late Friday evening, the House rejected the Senate's version and wanted to create their own version. Now, let's get you all caught up. President Donald Trump on Friday did sign this order to pay Transportation Security Administration employees as soon as Monday, after a deal that sought to do the same stalled in Congress. An hour earlier, House Speaker Mike Johnson rejected the Senate-passed bill to fund TSA and most of Homeland Security. Now, House Republicans were angry that the Senate's measure did fund Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Border Patrol, which the Democrats refused to fund without changes to immigration enforcement practices. The senators have already left town since passing their bill in the early morning, so it would take time for them to return to the House if the House winds up passing a different measure than the one the Senate cleared. And right now, this House version is in trouble because the Freedom Caucus, made up of Democrats, don't want to accept that. As I said, what's going on here is the House wants to fund their version, which funds the entire Homeland Security package, including ICE. And, of course, Senate, kind of bend a little bit and decided to accept what the Democrats' version would be, with the exclusion that they wouldn't have to take off their mask when working, and they wouldn't have to wear body cameras, and they wouldn't have to wear IDs. The Democrats said, fine, just don't fund ICE. So everything was fine and dandy, and Donald Trump said he had signed that and signed an executive action, and then Mike Johnson comes back and says, yeah, we're going to do our own version. And now we're back to square one, basically. And, of course, Trump still may do the executive action where he said he could pull money from, the big, beautiful bill to get this all done. And this is just it, folks. Surprise, surprise, surprise. The money was there all along, if you think about it. And Trump says, well, we'll just pull the money from the big, beautiful bill and get the TSA people paid, including back pay. I'll just sign executive action. We're still waiting to see if he can in fact legally even do that. We don't know. But, folks, this thing has been a frickin' shit show, excuse my French, from the get-go. I mean, if Trump could have done this all along, why was all this argument going on for the past, months of not getting these poor people paid? And the Democrats had a valid point. And the Senate had it all signed and taken care of. Okay, we won't fund ICE for now. Let's just get TSA paid, and we'll come back in April once the Easter break's done. We'll try to hash this all out. Lo and behold, Senate goes home, and now here is Mike Johnson and the Republicans going, we don't like any of this crap. We're going to do this version. Well, if they have to do their version, it's got to get signed by the Senate. The Senate's gone to recess. The TSA people, again, don't get paid. So there you go. I swear to God, I just don't know where these people, get their thing going on here as far as getting these poor people paid. It just makes absolutely no freaking sense. And I don't know what the hell is going to become of this if you're dealing with the House and them trying to just, muckle up what's already been done with the Senate, and then the Senate's gone to recess. The only thing that is going to work now is if they just allow Trump to go ahead and do this executive action and get these TSA agents caught up and paid. Because even if they do get paid, what's going to happen here is you're still going to have time for those who have been calling in sick to get back to work, and the long lines, even over Easter break, is going to continue. Because even if the TSA agents get paid, it's not going to be no miraculous turnaround within 24 hours. You're going to see the lines disappear, and you're going to see hundreds of TSA agents back to work. It's not going to happen. A lot of them quit. A lot of them still won't get paid for a while. And even though the money is flowing, and it's going to take time to cut the checks and get it to these people because they have a pay period, like every 2 weeks or bi-weekly, however they're getting paid. So I don't know what to tell you. So, you're just going to have to wait and see what happens. All right, let's move on to our news from overseas and with the Iranian conflict and what's going on there, because, folks, there's been a lot of action as well as there. So, at least 1,000 U.S. troops from the 82nd Airborne are set to deploy to the Middle East, according to the Associated Press. In fact, they may already be on their way. And if Trump is considering also, as he has just told Fox News recently, sending 10,000 more troops if Iran does not come to the table for a deal. He's given them 10 more days to come up with something. And this is another thing with Donald Trump, as you're well aware of. He likes to say, you've got till midnight tonight. No, you got till tomorrow. And then he turns around and says, I'm going to give you 10 more days to come up with something. So that's just how he works, And so here you go, 10 more days. Now, if he does send 10,000 more troops, that's going to probably mean, boots on the ground. And we don't want that, but it's probably going to happen in a way. So here we go, sending 1,000 troops from the 82nd Airborne Division to the Middle East, and of course the other troops. And you got the Marines already there, waiting to get deployed if once they get the word. And why does all this matter? Well, the unit is considered the Army's emergency response force. This is the Airborne Division, and can typically be deployed on short notice. It will make the latest addition to the American troops to the Iranian war since the U.S. conflict started. And this is it now. Everybody is calling it a war. And here's the bottom line. Since everybody's calling it a war, including the Department of Defense and Pete Hegseth, Congress is supposed to be able to approve or disapprove, the actions of war, because the war word is now being used. It's not being called a conflict anymore. And they're being left out. As you know, Donald Trump never told Congress anything about this. He's never told NATO anything about when this is supposed to start. He doesn't have a plan on when it's going to end, other than he keeps using the word, it's going to end very soon. Nobody knows what the definition of very soon is. So that's where our problems are. And of course, the Navy ships are already heading over there. And when asked about deployment, White House spokesperson Anna Kelly deferred to the Pentagon, but noted that the President Trump has always had all military options at his disposal, which is what he keeps saying. Now, Iran had received a 15-point proposal from the U.S. to reach a ceasefire in the war, two Pakistani officials said on this past Wednesday. The officials described the proposal broadly as touching on sanctions, relief, civilian nuclear cooperation, a rollback of Iran's nuclear program, a monitoring by the International Atomic Energy Agency, missile limits, and access for shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. And speaking of the Straits of Hormuz, this is where probably the Marines are probably going to wind up going. As you see the map here, they're going to be going just north of the Strait of Hormuz to try to get the mines that are in the strait out of there, okay? And as Trump has threatened, if they don't take those mines out, then Trump's going to go after the Iranian infrastructure. Now, as you're well aware of, Tehran did not even confirm receiving this plan and publicly missed the diplomatic effort while launching more attacks on Israel and the Gulf and Arab countries, including an assault that sparked a huge fire in Kuwait. International airport area, too, in Kuwait. Iran also continued to come up under a U.S. attack with President Donald Trump's surprising claim this week that talks with Iran were yielding great progress and it only raised more confusion over a war whose goals were already unclear. The most basic questions, what talks? If Tehran said there were no talks, why does Trump keep saying there's talks progressing? Because Iran has denied any talks have ever started at all, according to them. And so they say, how can you have talks when we don't know anything about those talks? That's what they're saying in Tehran. And it just goes on and on. Now, Egypt and the Gulf Arab nations are trying behind the scenes to piece together talks. So there are perhaps other countries in the Middle East are trying to negotiate these talks besides the U.S., since most the Iranian people over there don't like the U.S. in the first place, but maybe some of their other folks in the Middle East can get through to them. But we don't know that because nobody's saying anything. All right. So Israel is vowing to keep up its attacks, of course, and if anything, the war appears to be only escalating. Now, barrages were fired into Iran, Israel, and across the Middle East on this past Tuesday, pushed for negotiations since launching the war alongside Israel on February 28th. Attacks continue. The drone attacks continue. The ballistic missile attacks continue. Even though the U.S. says, hey, they're almost out of missiles, they're almost out of drones, we've got them right where we want them. So says Trump. And, of course, Trump has given it shifting and often vague objectives, and those mixed messages were displayed in recent days. He has talked of degrading or destroying Iran's missile capabilities, as I just said, and its ability to threaten neighbors, goals that he has some flexibility in declaring that he has accomplished. Now, a much tougher goal is ensuring Iran will never build a nuclear weapon, and Trump has insisted that it will be part of any deal. And, of course, reopening the Straits of Hormuz, as I just showed you, is a vital waterway for oil shipments that Iran made virtually impassable when the war began. Now, you need to know right here that Iran is allowing some ships through that have oil going to other places, like China, for instance. So some ships that are Iranian allies, they are letting those through. And, of course, the U.S. doesn't have much to say on that. Like I said, the whole thing based on this is the mines. If we can get the mines out of there, and that's probably what this, sending these military troops and the Marines are possibly going to do. They're going to go to that island north where there is a huge oil refinery that sits there, and they may deploy from there to get these mines out of there if they can get rid of all the missiles along the coastline there. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens if, in fact, that will even work. We just don't know. So that is what's going on in Iran. It just keeps going on and on and on. Now, another thing that just came out that was weird out of Trump's mouth recently. He is stating that he has gotten a gift from Iran, although not stating what that gift is. We are pretty much sure that that gift is oil and gas related, as with Venezuela has always been Trump's agenda. Get billions of dollars, for his empire and his family by seizing other countries' oil and gas. And I'm going to get into more detail about this, all right? So you got to listen to this podcast. Sometimes you get news here that you really don't hear anywhere else because we do more of a deep dive. This whole thing with Iran is about oil and gas. True, they got a terrible leadership over there, an ugly leadership, a leadership that has killed, thousands of people, including Americans. We all get that. And I don't care what we do over there, that regime will keep reinventing itself because it's been there for decades and decades before, and it will continue to be there decades and decades after. Just like with Venezuela. their regime is still in place, but they are now working with the U.S., and Trump is saying okay with that. And why it's okay is because we're now controlling a lot of their oil and gas in Venezuela. And as Trump's been very open about, the money now is in U.S. control, and he's putting that money in offshore accounts, all right? And then he said he will spend it and send it back to the Venezuela people, or to, however he wants to disperse that. Yeah, that's exactly what he wants to do, although he's running into a huge buzzsaw with Iran. He in partnership with Israel, want to control Iranian oil and gas for themselves. And he's finding out it's not as easy as he thought it was. Now, Elizabeth Warren just the other day had spoken about Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, who is drawing scrutiny over his fundraising for his special envoy, which is supposed to be a little, non-for-profit, helpful organization for peace. It's called Envoy for Peace. Remember that word. By trying to raise $5.4 billion. Now, it took in a $2 billion investment from the Saudis. All right. Trump wants a $1 billion minimum contribution from nations to participate. And Trump, he, of course, as president of this organization, has his name on the private equity firm. Now, remember, he created this because he didn't like what NATO was doing. So he wanted to create his own envoy for peace. And, of course, again, if you read between the lines, it's, again, just another $1 billion moneymaker for the Trump family. That's really what it is. And Elizabeth Warren is smart, and she has, pointed that out. They've already got billions of dollars, and they want billions of dollars more, and, of course, so far, 2,000 people have been killed across the Middle East as this war continues in its fourth week, now going into its fifth week. In Iran, Israel, and American strikes have killed 1,200 people, according to the Iranian Red Crescent Society. At least 1,000 people have been killed in Lebanon, and 17 have died in Israel. 13 U.S. service members have been killed, and 2 more died of non-combatant causes. Okay? Now, if you remember this past week as well, they tried to invoke the War Powers Act, since everybody's now calling this a war, and the Senate, going along party lines, unfortunately declined to invoke the War Powers Act by a vote of 47 to 53. 2 Democratic senators did decide to vote with Republicans on this. So, again, if we get boots on the ground, it's going to be a simple fact that more of our servicemen and women over there will probably get killed, all right? And it looks like it's imminent that there's going to be boots on the ground. And with no plan in place of when this thing's going to end, and this is why you're not getting a lot of help from NATO, is, hey, we'll help you, U.S., but give us a plan. What's the plan? When is this going to end? What do you got in place that it is there so we can make a really good, intelligent decision of whether we want to help you or not? And they can't give them that right now. They give, Trump thinks the American people are stupid. He keeps saying it's going to come to an end soon. Of course, a lot of Magna people goes, he says it's going to come to an end soon. So there you go. There's your answer. It's going to come to an end soon. He says so. He says a lot of things. And a lot of people with critical thinking skills go, yeah, that's fine. But, when? Instead of saying, okay, if that's what you say, great, well, let's move on. Yeah, I'm a little, being a little facetious here in the way I'm talking, but you got to keep in mind that, you got to have answers, and of course, Levitt, his press secretary defends him to whatever he says, and the president's in control and he's got a plan, and you people in the media don't need to know any more than that, and shut the F up and get out of here, and, so on and goes. Now, the Treasury Department, of course, just now announced this past Thursday that it's going to add President Trump's signature to paper currency to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the U.S., marking the very first time a sitting president's signature will appear on currency. There's no more powerful way to recognize the historic achievement of our great country and President Donald J. Trump than the U.S. dollar bills bearing his name, and it's only appropriate that his historic currency be issued at the Cinquential Centennial. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said in a statement. The announcement comes after the Commission of the Fine Arts approved a one gold coin last week that featured Trump's likeness in honor of the country's 250th anniversary. Under President Trump's leadership, we are on a path towards unprecedented economic growth. Really? That's not what the data shows. A lasting dollar dominance and physical strength and stability, Bessent said. Federal law has not allowed living presidents and in the past from being depicted on U.S. currency. However, a law signed by Trump at the end of his first administrative term, known as the Circulating Collectible Coin Redesign Act of 2020, included new language regarding that coins being printed and dollar bills being printed in paper currency could have the sitting president's likeness and or signature on there. And so there you go. If you haven't figured it out by now, Trump's ego is bigger than the universe. And this guy likes to have his image just like, people from World War II, which will remain nameless, but you know what I'm talking about. They think it's cool as hell to have huge banners hanging with your likeness on it so you can be reminded who is the president is, and Trump is no different. Now he wants his signature on paper currency. They're going to start with the $100 bills, and then it's going to go down to the $50 bills and then the $1 bills. It's all going to have Trump's signature on it. I don't think, from what I'm understanding, they're going to remove Washington and put his face on there, or remove Hamilton, or remove Grant. It's or Jackson, but his signature is going to be on there somewhere. And because he now legally can do that. And of course, when you got a Republican cabinet and, Scott being here for his beck and call, that's what's going to happen. So, again, hello, there you go. Let's have President Trump's signature on everything, and along with his likeness. He just loves to have everybody look at him. All right, and he has to have favorable light. And his ego demands that, everybody in the world remembers him in the past, now, and in the future forever and ever. Amen. Okay, so I don't know. It's absolutely crazy that he does this, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. All right, so Trump also is continuing his revenge tour. Now, as you're well aware of, his revenge tour is going on and on and on, and here's why it's going on and on is because of this guy. All right, his revenge tour now includes John Brennan. All right, this guy used to be our former CIA director, and they're saying he gave false testimony on the Russian interference case in 2023 over the 2016 presidential election. All right, and of course, this case was filed in Trump's friendly Southern District Court. Former Special Counsel Jack Smith's team had evidence, as you're well aware of, during this same time period, that Donald Trump had classified documents, including materials relevant to business interests after leaving office following his first term. So they go after Scott, and of course, now more stuff is coming up in Revelation from Jack Smith about Donald Trump. And what we're seeing there from the Justice Department, they were working on some documents as far back as January 2023 related to the investigation into Trump's alleged mishandling of classified documents. And he had some highly sensitive documents, the type that documents that only presidents and officials with the most sensitive authority have, which was 6 people. That included one document that he was showing to people on an aircraft. And again, this is what the Democrats have come up with. So while he's trying to go after, the former CIA director, now they're just turning around and throwing more of these documents in his face. So because, I guess they want to suppress his revenge tour, which you can't blame them. All right. So Jack Smith said that Trump had so many documents in his possession at one time, so many documents, and they're shown them to so many people that it was just absolutely crazy. They believe that he showed a classified map to others while on the flight, as I said, to his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, which was what happened at that time. And it was also witnessed by now Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. Of course, Susie Wiles is being absolutely quiet. Now, who's doing all of this? Well, Representative Jamie Raskin is the top Democrat in the House Judiciary Committee. He's the one that got a hold of these documents. And he summarized the memo's contents in a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, who will do absolutely nothing, obviously, saying that the document included damning evidence about Trump's procurement of highly sensitive documents. Now, the Justice Department's release of documents from Smith's investigation to the Republican-run House Committee for its probe into the past investigations into Trump might have violated U.S. District Court Judge Aileen Cannon's order. Again, she's from South Florida, bearing public disclosure of materials from the special counsel probe, Raskin said. Cannon issued the order after she dismissed the case on the grounds that the DOJ's appointment of Smith was unlawful, which it wasn't, but it's what she said. And the Justice Department under Biden appealed the ruling by Cannon, who had previously been reversed on appeal after she attempted to appoint a special master to review those classified documents seized from Mar-a-Lago. 3 Republican-appointed judges found Cannon improperly exercised equitable jurisdiction in the spatial master issue. Smith, who moved to dismiss the separate January 6 related case against Trump after Trump's 2020 victory, told Congress that the probe, his team had gathered proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump engaged in criminal schemes to overturn the 2020 election. In his letter to Pam Bondi, Raskin accused the Justice Department of being blinded by the frenzied search to find a scrap of evidence to attack Smith. Of course, she's going to say that. And what is even more damning on this is when Trump was showing this map, it also involved a lot of his business interests. In other words, and this is alleged, so don't sit there and, well, they said this on the Right Has Left podcast. This was alleged that Trump had these classified materials that he was showing them to business interests. Like, I've got this is cool. You can look at this, and I got some business dealings going on in relationship to what's on this map. All right. That is kind of where Jack Smith was leading. That I'm not saying it was play to pay type of thing, but that's what he's alleging. All right, so I'm not saying that, but that's what was mentioned in this, and on Jamie Raskin's documents, and where Jack Smith was going with this, because he said there was a lot of business interest tied into these classified documents that Trump demanded to keep a hold of, and so. Take it for what it is. I have no proof of it. So, but that's what's being alleged by Jack Smith on all of this. So you can take it for whatever it's worth. All right. So let's kind of move on with some of our stuff that's going also in our news today. And let's talk about the Democrats and their wins as we get towards the state of Florida. Now, the Democrats suddenly a jolt this past Tuesday through a lot of cool stuff going on by the way of votes, all right? And what that jolt was is they flipped 2 legislative seats, including a district containing President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. That's right, West Palm Beach flipped to Democrat. Now, the wins don't change the overall control of the Florida legislature, so they still have a Republican supermajority, but, that's a key word, but, they are making some strides into flipping Florida, all right, from red to blue. Very slowly, but they are doing it. People are beginning to say enough is enough. But the victories were, of course, heralded by state and national Democrats after years of GOP domination in the Sunshine State. Even jokes from Governor Ron DeSantis said that the state party was practically dead. And there is a lot of infighting with the Republicans against Governor Ron DeSantis, okay? It's common knowledge, Now, one of the key people that did win and took the West Palm Beach district is this young lady right here, all right? And that is Emily Gregory. She took 51% of the vote over her opponent, John Maples, who was endorsed by Donald Trump. All right, he only received 49% of the vote. And Tuesday's results add more tallies to a trend of Democrats flipping Republican-held seats in state legislatures across the country over these past 14 months. All right. Now, in relationship to that particular story, this guy here, Dave Jolly, who is running for governor, all right, he too is starting to lead in some polls. Now, most of the mainstream media still show that his Republican opponent is up by single digits is all, but he is still up and ahead. Jolly has some polls which showing him in the lead. Now, it is still early in the state of Florida, and there are even some Democrats who really don't like Jolly. Now, what the story of history is, Jolly used to be a Republican, and then he flipped to becoming a Democratic candidate because he had some changes in his thought process about how things should be. And so he decided to run for governor on the Democratic ticket. And he is all over social media. He is making some strides, and he is leading the other Democratic candidates. And so he is a guy to watch, all right? Now, whether he'll come out to where he's going to take over and lead his Republican opponent, we're going to have to wait and see what happens, all right? But keep an eye on Jolly and see where this is going to go. And speaking of the state of Florida, and I like to be transparent here on the Right Has Left podcast, because the lady you are now looking at is also a Democrat, and that is Representative Sheila McCormick. She is a Democrat from Florida, and she has been found guilty of 25 ethics violations after she was separately indicted on related criminal charges of stealing millions of dollars in federal relief funds and funneling some of that to her congressional campaign. Ms. McCormick has denied wrongdoing and pleaded not guilty in that particular case. But I'm going to tell you right now that she's probably going to go bye-bye, which is going to open up a seat in the state of Florida. And I'm sure the Republicans are going to jump right on that. And but, it hasn't happened yet, but I can guarantee you that she's going to get canned, because she's already got criminal charges against her. And when that happens, it's going to open up another seat here in the state of Florida. So she'll have to see what happens. All right, and before I wrap things up and say that is it here on the Right Is Left, I want to tell you about one other thing here. I want you to watch this special segment because, as you know, this is on Saturday when I tape this. It's No King's Day, and there's over hundreds of protests going on across the United States, and it's no different right here in Indian River County. And I've got a special report for you on the No Kings protest right here from Sebastian. Watch this.
If your skin is black or brown, my friend, you can be questioned or deported on sight. In our chains of ice out now, fashion's heart and soul persists.
Hey, hey, ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go.
So, what is your vision and your idea of what No King's Day is?
Well, for me, it goes way back because I understand our role in imperialism and our role complicit in so many genocides around the world. So for us, I knew if we didn't stop it globally, it was going to end up at our doorstep. So for me, it's multifold. Stand up for the oppressed at home and abroad, and let's keep funds here and not with AIPAC in our country to support our citizens' quality of life. Yes, no kings, hands off free speech, and
And that's been a lot of news this past week. A lot of stuff going on here in the state of Florida and also nationally. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast on The Right Has Left. I am your host, Roy Garden. And until next time here on The Right Has Left, you try to have a good week. Until then, take care. Thanks for joining us.